Hi, everybody. I'm very honored to be able to have David Jubb on my channel, and I'm going to call him right now. If you have any questions, just text them. You know what? Yeah, let's let's text them. Text them to me, and I'm just gonna put my number up here. If you're watching live, go to masterluki.com. Scroll down to the bottom. See where it says contact. Okay, and then you see my phone numbers right there. Okay, you can text me, or else just type it in the chat. Chat is up, and making the phone call right now. Oh boy. Hey,
Lucky.
Happyface.
Hey, how you
Hey,
doing, mate?
mate.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
you sound good and clear today. Amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've been
eh,
emptying out as best I can, so I'm glad about that.
yeah. I hear from people around the world. Australia, England, Spain, Canada. All over the place. Matter of fact, pretty amazing actually. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
You're
Amazing.
reaching out to people. That's quite amazing. Interesting, of course, because what's valid, typically, of course, like what's said has some face validity. Pretty much, what's said, like as it's said, you can hear if something is face valid, and the face validity is pretty strong for all of us. Where something is like that, there can typically be a different type of validity also, which is looked at, and that's called a construct. So some construct is being satisfied and can be looked at to see how that construct is, for instance, Another type of validity where someone's looking at what's valid is a context. So as you look at a contextual type of setting, and you can look to see how something is correlated, where events can be existing and things. Another type of validity, which is of a strong type, is expert validity, where you've got quite a few other experts which can see the same thing. And then, of course, you've got statistical sorts of validity as well. So the first types, like what we just talked about, is qualitative. And once you've got something qualitative that's valid, what's said, you're looking to see if it's repeatable, yes?
Okay.
Because what's valid should be reliable. So it should be able to be repeatable. And so, just to give our listeners a little bit of an idea, something certainly is qualitative, and then something could be just quantitative. But that quantitative types of validity really are fraught with all sorts of things which can be not variables necessarily controlled, and this sort of a thing, but where somebody's doing looking at something and they're using a statistical type of process. You can hear where we talked about it. It's sort of really, it is a process, but you've got to really be satisfied more on these other levels of validity. Mm.
Right.
So when you look at, so epidemiologists, in epidemiology, which is the study of disease, I guess that's, and lack of wellness per se, in a community and across the board in society and this sort of thing. You look at statistics, for instance, like back in 1918, which is really only 100 years ago. But forever and a day, always, there would be just a pattern of nature, yes, where people have where you're looking at excess mortality, for instance. And when symptoms would come on where something is, it's typical, for instance, that when the cold comes on, you've got a much higher barometric pressure, and hot, cold, that sort of a thing. It's typical that you'd always see an excess mortality in the winter and never not, yes?
Oh, right.
Absolutely. So, for instance, another pattern that you'd see is a typical thing which overall, what's the favourite time for most people to have passed on?
Oh, I know this one. Monday morning.
Yeah. What time?
Oh, 2 p.m., 2 a.m., 3?
Around 9, between 9 and 10 when people start work.
Oh, wow.
And so something, of course, isn't natural about that, but it follows something which you could understand has some construct and in a context of things that you could see that makes sense, doesn't it? And so when you're looking at something, you could see that always, for instance, patterns like this exist in data that you collect, and something could have a natural signature or it could have a totally unnatural signature, and which you could see if something is a natural signature or not. Going past the point that, of course, nothing is isolated, and no claim it be put to show such. And the same with carbon, for instance, and things. But if you go back into like 1918, you've got a couple thousand soldiers that went missing off the roll and never explained. But of course, in 1918, you've got the jab used, of course, and soldiers were shot before they went, into war and things. And there was an excess mortality extreme, and you could see the same sort of patterns that was going on where there was a spike more in the summer, which ordinarily would never be. It's the opposite. Well, it's the opposite always. Right. So that's an unnatural pattern. So if we look at what's COVID, of course, that's really not to be observed or something going on behind the scenes, where all of those things can be used to black swan and to have an asymmetric condition, meaning a non-conventional way that some war was fought. One can look into history and can see such. Yet, if you look at scientific reports, of course, we could see that there's a construct there, face validity, of course, and a contextual condition. And you've got experts that look at this and you could see a statistical validity, and that it's repeatable as it shows up where excess mortality is. And you can see and look at what the cause of mortality, or you can see things associated with the increase of where mortality is above what ordinarily would be. So deaths usually are higher in the winter, and always mortality really decreases after that, and over years increases a little bit. Over time you can see just right, okay, so those are sort of normal kind of things that's been going on yet until 2021 now. And just like back in 1918, all of a sudden you've got hard figures again of death. You've got a good look in the same way as a spike that goes on back in 1918, a spike that was exact kind of with the jab that was given soldiers and then civilians and other people, but all happened and wouldn't ever have a spike like that in the summer, which it did. And so if you could, 100 years pass by and a similar pattern is sort of going on, to be able to, under usury, clear away the debt for City Counter sort of have its sort of reset. Yep, it's a huge hump, which always goes on where that is of male mortality because of wars, which you could see, like in Ukraine at the moment, where you've got 100,000 mortality over a short period of the moment since then. But most can allow what's been really that follows like a natural pattern, like you could see that deaths would occur more in a winter, but when it doesn't, you can see something else is going on which isn't natural. Of course, you've got extreme weather. When Italy, the older people were got at a bit, it was more a winter thing. But again, you see in the summer the big spike going on more, which wouldn't ordinarily be. And then as a natural apparent sort of earthquakes and deluge, that's gone on with flooding and extreme weather events. You've got force multiplied types of weaponry being used, including cyber and manipulation of information that people can be receiving, so that you've got resistance sort of transfer going on and being manipulated to cause a swaying of people's brain or mind about something, and those are things which would ordinarily be put going on at all. But what's COVID, of course, about the whole circumstance is really a multiple assault more and like a cocktail, but you've got excess mortality. It's claimed really that, back then and ongoing, it's sort of like here, it was said, it was like, oh, well, this is going to save 14, funny about that number, million lives. Yet there were seriously aggressive practices, and those aggressive practices as a prophylactic sorts of treatment and things that was given to the older people, and these ventilators and stuff and the drugs that's used, wasn't easy for anybody much to be able to have survived. And you've got this going on more only in the Western nations. So jabs, like it was said in Canada, for instance, would save mortality, yet excess, of course, death shot up exactly, kind of right with the jab, just the same as it does anywhere where one looks. Of course, a virus doesn't refuse to sort of just all of a sudden cross a border so neatly, but you could see these sorts of things as patterns going on, which, if it's something is natural, it's not like some political border was a reason for it not able to cross over into that and be in that area. So counties, for instance, that had 5G and close by people in organisedness where people were neighbours didn't have the 5G, and so how come mortality really followed a lot of this sort of thing where it didn't have any excess mortality in places which really didn't have any of this? So it's that excess mortality. Well, yes, where the activity all is been and was rolled out in a similar way. It would do, so what? It just, if it's natural, it sort of doesn't really follow patterns necessarily like that, you see. But excess mortality shows definite artificially caused effect where it isn't natural, and because the jab utterly all of a sudden causes soldiers not to, or anybody not to be too fit for anything. And studies show that. But initially, what you've got is a lot of information causing people not to have any hesitation to be able to have gone to get that. And it's obvious that some people somewhere there have to have a greater overall knowledge and have even a situational awareness more to be more culpable, in a picture which can be set up a lot where it's only operating in cells within a cell. Yet where anybody looks in the nation and can see credit that's spent, and that was used to kill the elderly, and the older beloved genocided, and only in these various nations where this was, and not anywhere else. But it also coincides more where you've got spikes going on more in summer, which ordinarily again wouldn't be something that would ever happen, but naturally. And all through this time, of course, it's that the jabs are being promoted as having efficacy, aggressively being used, and causing huge peaks of excess mortality, where stats are, and which really shows a great statistical anomaly being natural, but yet when you look at the same sort of changes that occur wherever, you can see a pattern sort of being repeated. So usury, of course, where somebody would love to, they could be learning more about the eclipse movement, which is to get rid of usury, really is because at the end of that usury cycle, you've really got a spin into death more, where the debt gets settled because people are cleared away. Of course, the eclipse movement all gets anybody into more looking at what we should get rid of, which is usury, but what we should have instead is, of course, positive economic induction. And so nobody can be bribed. But the fact is that it is positive inducted to some persons out there, but not you or I. And so you've got this two-tiered sort of a system, haven't you? And would anybody have a feeling that actually somebody has a greater knowledge of awareness about the bits and pieces they're acting in as an agent? Of course. Absolutely. It has to be so, of course. But usury really is a trapped, vicious spin more to death of a nation, and it always was be wrecked. And the people who did it would always be kicked out more or less, or the system dropped or whatever in the past sometimes, and they'd be just going on to the next place, then wrecking that and going on to the next place, you see. So it's a vicious cycle, which is a back door of a swinging door of people who are in the industry of the big nick, getting into government regulation and going from government regulation jobs back into the big nick and this sort of thing. And so you've got a total criminal, predatorial type of environment, and where you've got nepotists doing things and that only have a certain gene pool that is relative, but yet it's 80% of all the higher level government sort of positions to make it like what the literature calls a ZOG, meaning a Zionist occupied government, and so there's a list, of course, of some 1,300 times or more that this ZOG type peoples, which are usury nepotists, were expelled in history. And if anybody wanted to look at that, you could see. And it's just a group that would be nepotistic that caused that. But everybody then seems to have got a bit of a mass punishment, see? Where you and I, we're looking at things, we should look at things correctly, honest. And when we don't, it's really not right at all. Where anybody's speech is, yet it really doesn't go well where stolen lands really are. and that everybody was cleared away as a race, and so you didn't have anybody necessarily to have to negotiate with. And the jab and wars function like as a force multiplier, as a weapon in asymmetric warfare, and that where Zionisticness is which is this sort of idea, which is a militarized zone for the bra of a ham or a bra man, which was the cowmen that had cows back in the past there. But if Zionists really vet what is, of course, you can see a lot of following along where Masons are, and all leading to Judaism, and you've got Christianity also all sort of leading more to Judaism in the story really of Abraham, which is a ruthless tradition that's militarized to have, by conquest, taken something, and that's a narrative that's being used, which most everybody like we talk about is under some narrative, and is that a proper scientific narrative? When the vast majority of all the names that's mentioned in these older texts and stuff, the vast majority of them can't really be correlated with anything. It's very allegorical. There's only very few, in fact, actually, that you really can go back and see that someone was truthfully there outside the literature or something where somebody got something put. But you've got the Jesuits, of course, all being used. I mean, these organisations and alphabet soup land type of organisations, causing whatever the idea is for you or I to have borrowed to cover some budget and deficit, and now all you're doing is to borrow just to cover what the deficit was, to have drawn everything off from interest, not to have paid anything off of what any principal is, and so much all become more debt bonded under that economic inductive condition of pledging, which is an ancient system of slavery, and that like what you're able to drive any older, for instance, car in a future moment, because all cars have got to have that remote kill box, and planes and things, and so it can be taken over by the external force, and so it's for your safety, apparent. You see, then things come up about what that would be, but you see, it's not you or I where we would be in charge that could be truly clandestine used to run a car through a border or something or anything. But the government keeps negative inductiveness and everybody in a state of collection. So it's $1 trillion we all got to collect this year to make sure you're just paying for the interest, and the debt of the principal never gets paid off. And so just like where Christians are, they were all given 2.5 billion of them more documents, which was really influenced by the Schofield interpretation of the Bible, and that is you've got Abraham really being promised the big Nick at the end time in that narrative, and it's really sort of a destruction of its enemy type of thing. It's a story, a narrative where no action really is taken to stop that. And a genocide, is where someone is. So looking at that as pawns in a picture. And so really, you've got stories which is very contradictory, but yet nothing of unity conscious. And you've got contradictory stats, of course, which shows like more of a pandemic, and considering it a pandemic because you've got excessive deaths and things by aggressive treatment, and a peak really, as we were talking about, in a moment of a time where moral rollout was, and that wouldn't have been caused regular by some mortality that would be natural per se, that shows like a actual plandemic versus pandemic. And then you've got hotspots of plandemic, more like what we were talking about, that show aggressive types of political directives and not, natural sorts of directives at all. So usury is like that. It's a vicious spin to death. Of course, the eclipse movement people could go to learn a little more at jubbdavid.com and tune into shows where you have there. Everybody could be getting rid of usury. Otherwise, it's really a trap vicious spin to death of any nation. We've got CBK controllers, which did sort of backdoor all global securities and things, and Zionism non-stop where this is. And there's a population which is really like only maybe 2% relative, but you've got nepotists actually in those high seats of governance up to 80% or more. And, as we said, it's sort of really the Zog Zionist type of occupiedness, you see, yes? So you've got a list of over 1,300 times that usury nepotists really had gotten expelled. And keep in mind, of course, you've got wars that are going on that fuel the coffer of what that is. And everybody else is a bit of a pawn in a picture until the fourth estate is activated and clears things up like this. And you look at what the kill box is that actually caused that, which is really common law trespass and legal name fraud. So it really doesn't go really well where any lands get stolen, of course, where you don't have your natural right as title would have been taken away. But to kill a whole race and genocidal and using the jab, nobody's going to say that in the past that wasn't used and isn't today. Check and balances existed in the past, even of 9/11 or JFK, for instance, or Pearl Harbor or any of them. So everybody could hear really, yet Zionists where you've got Masons and all of it leads to Judaism, basically, and even Mason does. So it's a very stealth, that you've got Masons being in stealth and you've got the Talmuds more trumpeting it out and everything. But it's not too unity conscious for sure. And anybody, you could say, your ethnocentricity, couldn't it be that's coloured your worldview? And so members really of any group, we the people, and yet those are groups which can have been corrupted, and conflict resolution could have really been more about currency being ever made more for the big nick, and generals in the defence forces across the world ever been more maybe Jesuits, for instance, and things and such. Now to borrow where anyone is to cover some war budget and the deficit that all would go into, most are not necessarily thinking, oh, well, we'll have to have paid that back. What is the system itself? And that's created all of this that's paying the piper. And so that's what's been redacted, hasn't it been? The conversation that relates to what this is. But if you just cover years of a deficit, you could really be able to, not necessarily like what we were saying, have an old car anymore. Yeah? Right. And in a short moment, that sort of kind of thing that goes on. But you've really got what's COVID, really, which is a massive lack of leadership. Yes? And so then it sort of translates to, gee, who's got any trust much in any leadership out there? And is that not put so that people wouldn't have that trust in each other or somewhere where you received investment, but you only receive investment where your private property is being protected, and government only be designed to protect private property. But if you ask anybody there, do you know how to protect a private right? Many of these black sock white ones are going to scratch their head about it. But what happens really when you see no response? You see, yeah? Like you just see people scratching their heads about something. But the data shows a very serious condition, like it did, keep in mind, in 1918. Back then, you've got spikes that was abnormal, that was in the summer, which ordinarily never would be. And you've got Subic House controllers really setting up Western-backed types of things like 10-7 recent and the war in Gaza, which is set up, and a morality where ethnic cleansing is wherever it is. Most look at that and think it's that truly disastrous, and it's a setup sort of where it's monopolised, and again, who's seeking agreement, which that's normal. It's not normal, these things like what you're seeing, and where's the fourth estate in the picture? Otherwise, you've just got crime ever more enabled and ennobled. So you've got neighbouring nations where that conflict is, and Yemen, and you've got extremely conflicted, polarised conditions where things are, where war can have been waged for decades, and a sentiment that really is intense. Of course, Jordan and Algeria and Egypt, nations after nation, all really have reacted ever more and don't go along with this idea of any sort of collective type of punishment, which the Gazans existing in Israel and all people are underneath all of that. So innocence where somebody is, and the USA embassies where protests are existing around the world, in Indonesia, in places where the violence of really, it's a clash of those colonial third world nations looking at their colonizers, and just having blocked any voice of any repressedness, including all those who are, put into refugee type of circumstance and their lives lost. Yet all of us preserve, both are preserved, we should, you and I preserve and protect and defend the laws of the land, and that is outside the corporation, under the laws of your nation, and it's really a civic duty as we the people. And so, to stand back and just allow that, that's a crime itself of a misprision of felony to see such. But you've got jab spikes that didn't consider any condition that would be normal as abnormal looking, and abnormal peaks, again, the same like what we said in 1918. And so nothing much repeated since, except for, patterns that show a correlation where certain jabs have been. And in the US, you've got the active army, and where is it true that 97% of those sort of got vaccinated? It's many exemptions were asked for, and how dare most of them not be approved? It means lots of people were truly, truly forced on us, and spikes with myocarditis really is up sort of some 151% according to what the stats are, and you've got the rise of a dramatic increase in heart failure with the US military soldiers, some 973% more, connecting with all of this jab toxin. And so where is that discussion going on, and who is the actual official, which you could say is accountable, because who is it that's supposed to have an oath to you and I not to have stepped in any other man's way, and someone's professional position could be something, but they also have a personal and natural self there, which anybody there sort of really is under oath for. But violations wherever oath of office is, of course, you'd see that all people in the past would all be removed, of course, and investigated. And it's really Article 4 and 3 courts more, which can look at government discretion and contractual transgression, and all really is hard pressed more to kind of say that, well, we're the people really is behind any of those heinous acts, except that we're standing by and looking and observing it, and we as a force of state should take action to help clear things up. You've got polls, media, all of it is monopolised, and how could anybody say that any one majority anywhere was supportive per se of anything that's going on, where no transparency is, including like the genocide where kill shots are. You've got a legal kill box set up that's genociding, and as people could imagine, where Israel or Gaza or anybody is in this moment, of course, Russia and Ukraine, you're looking at a kill box that had been set up, and people just getting trophies, hideous sorts of trophies from those are hunting trophies and badges, and for murder, which is an intent sort of very on a gravest sort of order, really, where awards could be given for such like that. Of course, the world really is controlled by monopolised propaganda, and in the height of the evil, you've really got leaders as patsy, working for the company, and their loyalty isn't meant to you or I, unleashing sorts of genocide. And many times in history, nobody could say you can't rule that out. We're the people really, which is been put upon as a crime of misprision of felony to stand by and look at that, of course, and many can know that's going on, not perform our civic duty like we should. It's really Highness 9/11, 10/7, 3/11. It's really paid patsy under a company that really kind of stated in the past on us. When you listen, you can hear dialogue like it, and they don't care about these soldiers in their dialogue. They could think about things like a soldier as a dumb animal, and disgusting, and to just be pawned in some foreign policies, or a combat ant, and so obviously not even similar to yourself. And so it's very unethical, but yet, of course, ethical that somebody would look at what the danger is of all half-truths that only put, and yet personal knowing, like we were talking about of genocide, and anybody that gets stand-down orders not to investigate, and where suddenly you're looking at crime and it's not being investigated, you've got patsy always virtually left in the picture, totally untarnished and being protected. And you've got a two-tiered vision going on, everybody can look and see, and that's obvious. Then you've got a criminal pattern going on, isn't it? Because you've got where somebody can be virtually left untarnished, and you've got a two-tiered system, and who's closed or close enough, definitely to know, what the detail is of treason going on, and it's really a whole array of personal knowing by various people, of course, certainly in the company and things. Have you got a great situational awareness of how a government really can have been functioning with some transgression, and so participation in JFK murder or any of these false flags and things as crime. You've got agents which reveal sort of genocidal crime, at the end of their lives. You can hear them, like what happened to Marilyn Monroe and this sort of thing. You've got people that should be let out of Pry Son and Pry Daughter that are political prisoners and things, which we the people, to function, we should be activating the fourth estate, which is Article 3 and Article 4 courts, or King's benches or Queen's benches and things, So king and queen means we the people. So in those nations, yet ongoing criminal patterns really are only not taking orders from any of we the people, but senior executive service and who's influenced those people. Yet many alive really can still highly be engaged more where genocidal campaigns are going and still living today. And like, for instance, you've got people that were certainly involved in Cambodia back in the day, finished only in 1979. You've got massive killing fields, and in the past, not anyone, more or less, too much of what the crime was to be brought home to roost, you see. And so this is the moment in the time that all should be reset proper, and that is what the strange attractor is that's drawing us ever more forward. But you've got the similar company patsies otherwise involved in too many numerous sorts of genocidal campaigns and things. And like in Pakistan, you've got also genocidal wars in East Timor long ago and Indonesia. And those controllers the same as today of a murderous policy, really, which you could see unanswered going on, and to have not in the past much deviated from that pattern of conquest, and really just to depopulate and control the globe, where the past really has been a total lack of a trust in leadership. Of course, you can truly understand and appreciate the reason why. And so it's you and I really being more in the fourth estate active, particularly think of which is above the corporation and government and is the government function. And we the people used to have been just used as a proxy, like what in the story we'll be talking about, for those controllers just to have their own genocidal policy over the top of the other people. So the controllers or your stakeholders really are using we the people as a proxy, using the UN as a proxy, using these nations, corporations owned as their own proxy, and using that as a proxy to get to all of us. And so you've got two big stakeholders, of course, in the nations corporation, which really is for the owners of the stakeholders, not you or I. And 195 will run the same way. You've got people's credit, all ours, and everywhere being corrupted and taken and all being put into a debt-bonded type of system as negative economic induction, which that's what ends. It cannot be upheld anymore. It's absolutely illogical. And that's why positive inductive currency comes to be, where you are the real estate, which you are, of course, and that's no longer the sacred cow, something not really being spoken about. Yet it's perpetual otherwise. You've got really genocidal, predatorial types of positioning, don't you? And all of that's been over the top of you and I like a kill box, a legal kill box, which is that all cleared up when you've got a true ID? Of course it is. And of course it is where you've got positive induction like you're supposed to as well. And everybody should have an account for the next 210 years as selecting a republic of peace. So a globe where we the people really is no longer can be being used where you are as some pretextual football match where one's going to be the winner, the other's the loser. Yet you and I, we're in as the fourth estate is active, you've otherwise, when we look into the past, could you say that no one properly really was of any active nature back at the ranch house, you see? People were out there riding the fence and no one was home proper active at the ranch house. So truly being used, all of us, we the people, as proxies for a genocidal policy which no one themselves came up with, and peons in the system of a criminal banking cartel of a one world order, which has just caused a widespread slaughter more as a force multiplier kill box to depopulate. And is anybody questioning what that is, or is this just something like criminals completely redact, and you can have been syndicated because you have redacted all sorts of things. So it's legal, yet it's totally not lawful. And so what is by incent is not by consent. And without hellfire missiles that was used, could 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers, for instance, you've also got 15,000 civilians, could those hellfire missiles which have been fired on those 15,000, could that have just occurred just like in that slaughter? You've got soldiers which really got shot by the jab in the past, and also the controllers of CBCAR, which is really a serious global error, isn't it? And what's that of your nation if you've got some foreign interference? And could it be really seen that you've got a really loose moral authority, really, that's operating with impunity, that's going on and attacking we the people? And it's really up to this point, you really, like we talked about here, it's just been a sacred cow because it's not necessarily something spoken about like it should be. So usury really is you and I having to have continued on upholding the past, which the cost of that is just way too great to continue with. Yeah? And the real reset is positive inducted currency and a real true name. So it's really you and I where the fourth estate is active, which is above government, and it's pre-ordered, pre-authorised. Everybody is under the Magna Carta. The whole world only is held together because of contract. And so it's proper chain of command for you or I to collect whatever evidence exists about if transgression does exist. And certain it is, nobody could say that swinging regulatory door between you working in the big Mick and then jumping into regulation of that private industry or whatever. It's just double oath or similar type of thing, and no separatedness of any powers like supposed to be check and balance. And so these are very seriously conflated types of conflicted interests, which really is going on where a nation is, and which is really what common law courts or record trial by grand jury process more is a chain of command that really is needed to be able to correct all this government transgression, you see. And so most people are caring about this because to protect people in governance, you protect we the people where we are. And the patsy, which always can have been used, which the public really don't follow too much, but influence everything, because all leaders really that you could see memed, all the time, and to kick off some sort of COVID type of a plan. But you've got CBCAR corporate nations activity and insider investigated, and where's that ever going to go? It's never ever gone anywhere because it's got such conflicted vested interest. And one's only been left with some fictional level of investigation and nothing properly dealt with, you see. So that's why something should be verified, not on a presupposition only. That's to shift to a level of what's verified. You have wet ink signatures and living being in this fourth estate, which is really what's needed to be able to act upon government and have proper check and balance on transgression. So we the people, can be swapped out for a word like baron or king or queen or lord. All of those words under the Magna Carta, you can see we the people there. You see, yes, and this is of where your natural right is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Jubb, you're a genius.
Yeah. Well, none, you could say, under CBCAR could have ever been told the truth, of course, because you could see C.B. Coward doesn't want the truth told, and you could hear what is and look and see what's completely redacted. And so it's a criminal behaviour that redacts things. Otherwise, there's nothing redacted. But you can see what subject matter more is redacted. And so, you cannot find too much of anything what this is. And so you're looking at really what truth is, which where this can be investigated. Of course, you really can see that it's a uni-party state, no matter what, because, well, it's just one owner, and that one owner could have two or three parties where something is, but it's a uni-state, you see, as a nation. And that is part of a cover-up, which really ongoing until that pattern has stopped. You've got a timeline, really, of a constructive, contextual and criminal sort of found patterns of fact and motive certain that's behind all sorts of stand-down orders that were given where people would come close to uncover crime where they found it. Suddenly you've got a stand-down order you end up with, and it's don't investigate. And so you got some famous conditions that kicked a lot of things off. The Franklin cover-up in Nebraska is a famous case. And, of course, you've got 9/11 type false flags are done. And keep in mind, of course, you've got excess mortality, which is rife all after the jab. Where are you showing the stats and who is the watchdog where the corpse is? You've got the fourth estate, which is above that corporation, and that's where the check and balance is. So if you and I, we can administer what you could see going on, meaning you can see a pattern recognition of what's pretextual that's put as a false claim. You could see how that disrupted attention, of course, and to distract people from away from and have transfer interference used by creating stress where something is more underneath everything, and sway people's transient perception. Yet, so for a certain effect and everything. So those are things which is not about yours and my informed consent at all. No contract can exist because of it. No consideration ever was either. So no contract exists about that, you see. But you and I, we need to be setting things up so that we can take care of things so it works proper. So none under C.B. Coward directive kind of said that they would care that the truth was exposed. Keep in mind, of course, you've got this background of a cell in a cell operating all where C.B. Coward is and control of various rising stars, and some become lone rangers, and others become a gold finger, and they invest in an agenda that makes it look like something is perhaps natural where that isn't, and certainly it generally is not for our own economic benefit. So you've got woollyhood and bullyhood all being used and run by the CIA, which has a much larger budget than the CIA as an alphabet soup plan. And you can coordinate controlled effort, can't you, where you've got such a massive cross-section of society that you've got on the payroll. So all you can see really is enforcement of some centralised power where the hands are at stake. You've got the stakeholders, haven't you, in their thought. That's what's at stake for them. And you've got this equity swap coming up December the 15th. So C.B. Coward usually really is a setup under the ancient slave system, like we said, of pledging. And 210 years, you can't have a nation in bondage beyond that. That's international law. This is way past the point of it. And to forever control all only by you and I ever being okay with having an infant decedent account. If you ask people and they know that, they definitely are not okay with that. So to be run over by you having been given a service with a kill box that put over everybody, that took away your natural right and only left you with a duty, responsibility and the privilege, according to someone else, if you exist or not. And so in that picture, somebody was really just a bit of a number, inside somebody's private corporation as a holding. And, that's not a list you should put the living with, yeah? You put the living with the living and the dead with the dead, yeah. So anyway, just that sort of a small nutshell to get out to everybody. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I can't add anything. I just really appreciate the level of the depth of your communication, Dr. Jubb.
Yeah, well, we should pass things on. You really do pass things on as you can, and it's really what's common sense and what's our common practice of time worn of the past, and these things which we've talked about here is really what everybody's saying, you see? Yes, it's a good synopsis of things which you can find all over the place, in fact, yeah. So, and in a nice, tidy spot, yeah. So anyway, tomorrow I'll be doing some things, I guess, but if you've got some time, maybe there could be a moment which we can connect in a little bit, yeah. Anyway, I would love for people to know a bit more about what one can do to clear up and make your blood better and this sort of thing. And, of course, there's a book that people could go to at jubbdavid.com, Jubb Cell Rejuvenation, and you could have a look a little bit more into that. But anyway, that might be something that we could talk a bit more about how did our cells arise and colloidal biology and this sort of a thing. Yeah. All right.
Most beautiful work I've ever seen, Dr. Jubb.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Love you, Lukey. We'll talk to you in a bit, mate. Come on, mate.
Look forward to it.
Come on. Okay, mate.
Okay.
Yeah.